Good morning, Homestead, and once again, happy Advisory Day. Mr. Baker coming to you for the third time. This week, our topic is propaganda. So we're going to talk a little bit about what propaganda is, the purpose, look at some examples going back to Nazi Germany, revolving around Hitler's rise to power and the Holocaust, and then do a little bit of discussion about what is the propaganda that you see in the world today. And I guess, are we used to seeing negative propaganda? Is that where most of our experience with propaganda comes from, the negative? Is there positive propaganda? Does that exist? Should we be building up the positives in our world and not so much focusing on the negatives or destroying people, but lifting up and encouraging, through propaganda, showing what avenues we have for outreach and for encouragement and for helping each other? So we're going to look at there's quite a few slides today, and just some images, some artwork, some posters from the time, and some of these are kind of hard to look at. There's nothing necessarily graphic, but just the intention and what the results of the propaganda would eventually become. So we'll go ahead and look at some of the slides in the PowerPoint. And this first one, right above the title there, the power of propaganda. This first image is a painting. It's showing Hitler to the far right, and he's talking to a room full of people. And just, as you look at this image and just the different visuals that you see, Hitler on an elevated box, people sitting around a table, people standing in the background, very attentive. There are some looking down, but they're looking at sheets, maybe with the dialogue of what the party platform is. They all seem to be a little bit older, but just a very interesting picture. Visually, do you think this looks threatening? Visually, does this send any kind of image to you? So we're gonna just look at that, and we're gonna come back to this image in a little while. I'll give you the title, and once you get the title, I think the image becomes a little bit more significant. But really, I guess just look at these questions. This poster about Hitler. What is it that you know about Hitler? How do you know those things? How have you come to your understanding? How or why might others think differently about the same person? Why do different people at that time, in context of that time, why was he looked at in such high regard? And today, what is his image? And what role does he play, or what role does the German state play in shaping that image? Propaganda, and here's just a definition of what propaganda is. Information, ideas, rumors deliberately spread widely to help or harm a person, a group, a movement, institution, nation, etc. The deliberate spreading of information, rumors. The particular doctrines or principles propagated by an organization or movement. Now, looking at that definition, does propaganda affect you at school, affect you in your life, affect you in the hallways? If you look at the deliberate spreading of information or rumors, does propaganda exist around us? Going back to the slide from the title page, the title of that painting is "In the Beginning Was the Word." And so when you think about Hitler broadcasting his message by giving speeches, in the beginning was the Word. But if you think more deeply about that image, there's a very direct correlation between that title and Scripture. So in a way, the German state or Hitler being presented as the Messiah. So given the title, given the context, it has a much more powerful impact. So let's look at just the image of Hitler, just kind of some of the imagery that goes on. Just below the X on the far left-hand side is an image of Adolf Hitler from his World War I service. He did serve in World War I. He was a decorated soldier in the war, and so that can be built upon. You have an image of a man just reading a newspaper, sitting back, relaxing, reading a newspaper. In this image, he's looking more like the father figure. He's talking to one of the Hitler Youth members, has the hand on the shoulder, but very much a father figure. Here, a man and his dog. One of my favorite images that's not in here is Hitler and his driver. As he's out running for office and out meeting the people, you see an image of Hitler and his driver out, and over the front, over the hood of the car, they have a map spread out. Here's just two guys trying to figure out where they're going next. So just an average, everyday man, right? Just somebody like you and I. But here, we see just a little bit different of an image. This is on an album. It's an image of what appears to be an angry Hitler. And when he would give his speeches, he would become very dramatic. But this is put out by the party. This is information about Hitler that can be given to, broadcast via albums, via record players. So a way of spreading information. Here is Hitler again, looking very different, in his military uniform. This is 1927, and it's at a rally. So just presenting that different image. This is one of the posters, a 1932 election poster. And what this is displaying is 1932, this is one of the very early elections where Hitler could travel by airplane from one city to another and to another and to another very quickly with the aircraft. So your ability to get out, meet the people of Germany, spread your words, spread your ideas, and just make connections. This is the propaganda of the time, the radio. The people's receiver is what they called it. And when you think about information going out today, how does it go out? Do you get any of the information today in your life from the radio? Do you listen to the radio? Do you listen to talk radio? What kind of stations do you listen to? Newspapers. Do you read newspapers? Do you read magazines? Where does your information come in? One of the debates and one of the interesting questions, what would happen, going back in history, if the Nazis would have had social media, if the Nazis had Twitter, if the Nazis had Facebook, if the Nazis had social media, what would the impact have been? Their way of disseminating information was via the radio. And there were several days where high-ranking members of the Nazi Party, for birthday presents given to the people, they would pass out radios to the people. Very nice, very generous, very caring. But what's the motivation? The idea is, let's spread propaganda to the people. Let's get our word out to them. And these are just some posters. This is talking about the people's receiver. Every comrade is a radio listener. This one is talking about the 13th Great German Radio Exhibition. So this is the new technology at the time. This is the new means of communication. But there's also this poster that shows the dark side. This one's talking about a traitor, somebody who's listening to a foreign radio station. So you can't always control what people hear, what people listen to. So if you know of anybody who's listening to foreign propaganda, you should turn them in. 1934 propaganda poster. Yes, Führer, we will follow you. Excitement, energy, enthusiasm behind the idea of what Adolf Hitler is. Again, this is another military presentation of who Hitler was. Great leader. This poster is just connecting back. It's a reminder of an Allied propaganda poster during World War I. The Allies were depicting the Germans as this beast, harming innocents, kidnapping innocents. And the Germans just want to put this image back out and remind the German people, hey, this is what the West thinks of us. Keep that in mind. This is an image. The swastika is rolling through the chains. This is kind of showing the restrictions that were put in place with the Versailles Treaty and how the Nazi Party will deliver freedom from those chains. Victory over Versailles. Here's where it gets difficult, and these images can be challenging. And what you're looking at here is just an image of, when you think about the Holocaust, I don't know, is the first thing that we think of the destruction, the decimation of the Jewish populations. There were other groups targeted as well, one being intellectual disability, physical disability. And this image is just kind of conveying that in this person's lifetime, it will cost 60,000 Reichsmarks to take care of this individual who is suffering a disability. And the question posed here is, citizens, this is your money. Likewise in this picture. Here you have the presentation of, it's going to cost the same amount of money to take care of this family of 5, and look at how they're presented, as it would cost to take care of this one man who is suffering a disability. So when you think about throwing these financial ideas out, putting in people's head, is it okay to take care of a group of people if it's a financial burden to the rest of us? Propaganda. This is an image. History was against the Jews in the sense that anti-Semitism during World War II was nothing new. There were all kinds of stories throughout the years, and this is an image of what was called the blood libel. And the idea was that Jews would kidnap Christian children and sacrifice them as part of rituals. This was never proven. There is no evidence ever of this taking place. But just like rumors and word of mouth, sometimes they become truth because people believe them. Is perception reality? And this is an image taken from a magazine, a newspaper, a Nazi Party newspaper called Der Stürmer. Sorry, Mr. Yeager, for my German pronunciations. I'm not very good at that. But this is propaganda trying to reinforce in people's heads what is going on. This is a result of some of that anti-Semitism. These are Jewish children being kicked out of a swimming pool, of a recreational facility. Jews start getting banned from public places, and the propaganda will help reinforce that. This is a flow chart. This is a racial flow chart used in schools to help describe who is German, who's not, and also who is Jewish and who's not. And tracing back to, if you have one grandparent, you are Jewish. You could be a practicing Catholic. You could be a non-observant Jew, but still be considered Jewish underneath this racial ideology. And again, taught in the schools. This, to me, is one of the hardest images that exist. And this is a children's book called The Poison Mushroom. And it's teaching, and you can see by the images on the mushrooms, the faces, stereotypically Jewish images. What this says is basically, okay, mushrooms can be good, and sometimes people go hunting for mushrooms. Let's go out and look for mushrooms and cook them up and eat them. But a lot of mushrooms are bad, poisonous. They can cause illness and death. So you have to be very careful about what mushrooms you collect. This book delivers the same story about Jews. Yes, there are some Jews that are good, but most are bad. So we should treat all with caution. We should treat all with concern. I said earlier, this is a children's book, and this image just reinforces that. Here are kids looking at this book, reading this book, being reinforced with the idea that you should be cautious and be wary of Jews. And these are just little innocent children who are reading this message. The girl on the left has another children's book in her arms, and that book, here's an image of it, it's the same thing. It's just a story reinforcing, be cautious of the Jews. The Jews are evil. Here is an anti-Semitic coloring book. So when you look at propaganda, how young do you target it? How young do you target your audience? Pretty young. These are action figures of the day. Movable right arms, so you could issue the Heil Hitler salute. Here are board games. This board game is about the expulsion of the Jews. This board game is about radio stations. There are good radio stations and there are bad radio stations. As you move around the board and you land on good radio stations, you get a reward. If you land on bad radio stations, you get some type of fine. You have to lose a turn. You have to move back a few spaces. So again, just trying to reinforce party ideas. Is this the image that they want to portray? Is this a good German youth? Likewise, is this a good German youth? This one, you too belong to the Führer. Here is one calling for students to be the Führer's propagandists. So looking at targeting students, indoctrinating students, and then they carry on the Führer's wishes. We'll talk next week about some rescuers. And there's one group of students that are called the White Rose. And these students speak out against Hitler, speak out against the Nazis and what they're doing, and they will eventually be caught and executed. So does propaganda catch on all levels? No. There is still resistance. This is an image of the League of German Girls. So when you think about the Hitler Youth, and groups that would attract young boys, there's also groups that attract young girls. You know, the idea being you too are part of us. You too are part of the group that's considered appropriate. This is a picture saying this is why we fight. We fight the enemy because this is what we're protecting. Our youth, our innocence, the good German people, racial purity. Now, this is why we fight the enemy. Well, who's the enemy? And looking at this image, you see the Allied flag. You see the flags of the Allies. You see the British, the Americans, the Russians, the Allies fighting the Germans. But behind it, again, you see a stereotypical image of somebody who is Jewish, that they're the ones controlling the Allies. Here's a movie poster for an anti-Semitic film. Here's another movie poster for an anti-Semitic film. And I think what's interesting, these images at that time would translate into anti-Semitism. People would see the stereotypical image of somebody who is Jewish. Do we see that today? Does that resonate with us? This image, beware of typhus, avoid the Jews. So connecting the Jews to the spread of disease. Now what's interesting is if we go all the way back to Irena Sendler, Life in a Jar, she knew the Germans were scared that the Jews carried typhus and that they were scared of catching that disease. And she uses that against them. You know, she tries to kind of blow that image or idea up to more than what it is, and that gives her the ability to rescue Jewish people. So sometimes you can take the propaganda and use it against. Here is a Russian language propaganda poster connecting a massacre that was not carried out by the Jews, but this image is saying, yes, this is a Jewish massacre. This is in the Ukraine. These images are saying the Jew is your eternal enemy. This is an image of Joseph Goebbels, and he is the propaganda minister. And when you think about that term propaganda minister, they have an entire government bureaucracy set up to establish propaganda and to promote propaganda. It's a bureaucratic system, and these are the people behind it. Going back just one more time to that flow chart of racial ideology. Who is a Jew and who's not? Because I want you to think about this, and again, go back to this idea being taught in schools. And then think about this image. Whoever wears this symbol is an enemy of our people. Whoever wears this symbol is an enemy of our people. 1942. And then you look at these two young girls who are wearing that symbol. So are these the enemy that the Germans are scared of? Is this the enemy that the Germans are thinking will take over and destroy them? That's what the propaganda will say. And this is a heartbreaking image. This to me is a graphic image, because you see young children, innocents, but what they're being depicted as is an enemy to civilization. These are also, I think, graphic images. This is an image of the Warsaw Ghetto, and you can see up in the kind of the upper left-hand corner on a cart a movie camera. And what the Germans are doing here, and again here in this image, nice clothing, happy children, smiling, sunshine, no threats. This is a camp called Theresienstadt. Here's another one of that very same camp, Theresienstadt. And what the Germans did was they brought in movie crews and they shot good images here. They shot movies of a soccer game or kids playing or people eating picnics and happiness and great surroundings. And this is what the concentration camps were supposed to look like. This is what the Germans let the Red Cross in to see. And they filmed it. Now, once the Red Cross left, the people in these camps, for the most part, are rounded up and they're sent to Auschwitz and killed. So the outside world is also being fed propaganda. This is a 1941 propaganda poster talking about the annihilation of German culture if the Allies win. Who is behind the Allies? The Jews, as we saw reinforced in that image from earlier. Here's another one. He is to blame for the war, 1943. Here's another one kind of talking about victory over the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks, or the idea in Russia being connected to the Jews as well. This is a parade going down a street, kind of showing the danger, from a float's perspective, the danger of the Jews. This again is from Der Stürmer. The Jew as a warmonger is what's going on here. The non-Jewish world is being crucified on the cross of war. So as the Germans are expanding, as the Germans are going out and conquering, war is being blamed upon the Jews. Another image of the very same thing. When you look at these propaganda images, they can be emotional. They can be, do you have an emotional connection to the figures shown here? If you're German, and this is talking about a German city under attack, and we are all behind you, we're all supporting you, looking at the images of what is being portrayed as good, a young boy with the Hitler image in the background, this is powerful propaganda. This is 1946. Never forget. And you see a man with the Allied flags there. Here's a man with a sledgehammer pounding the Nazi swastika into pieces. Never forget. Let's destroy Nazism. So as you walk through these images, they can be very powerful and very emotional. But I guess my question to you, and something that will come back next time, were these all negative images? When we think about propaganda, is it always playing upon people's fears? Is it always used to control? How is propaganda used? Can you think in your advisory groups of examples of propaganda today? Propaganda from the standpoint of the news media. Think about from the student's perspective. Is there propaganda in their world? When we think about songs or media, social media, what propaganda is out there? So maybe brainstorm and share some stories about experiences with propaganda. And my challenge is going to be the next couple film sessions like this, I want to look at some of the heroes, some of the rescuers from World War II. Is there propaganda that shows the greatness of what they did? Or do we sometimes not know the stories of our rescuers? When you think of being a bystander, we talked about that last time, being a bystander, watching what's happening, not getting involved for one reason or another, just walking away and not helping. Do we want to be bystanders, or do we want to be upstanders? Do we want to stand up for what is right? Do we want to stand up and demand this is the way we want our school, our community, our world to be? And if we're going to be upstanders, how do we do that? I know that exists within the hallways. I know there are students out there, teachers out there, who want positive hallways, positive school climate. We want to engage the world. We want to engage the community and make a difference. How can we as a community be upstanders? So let's brainstorm that. Let's talk about that the next couple sessions and see what we can come up with. So Homestead, have a good rest of your day. Talk about this in your advisory. Feedback to me at any point in time if you want. Hope you enjoy your weekend. All right, see you later.